Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, Pikachu's wearing bubblegum lip gloss and low-rise jeans because he's having his best year since 2000. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. We've got a good show for you today. We're going to be talking about the news from the week, including Microsoft purchasing Activision Blizzard. And then on Thursday, we are educating ourselves on the Pokédex. But in the meantime, Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. I mean, educating ourselves on the Pokédex, not a minute too soon, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, arguably 22 years too late, right? If Pokemon's having their best year since the year 2000, you know, it seems like we're a little behind the curve on this one.
A tiny,
just like
tiny
a little
bit.
out of touch. Yeah, it's all right. All right, speaking of things that we are not out of touch with, we are very much in touch with my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch. Would you like to borrow it? You can certainly try. All you gotta do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and give us a mailing address where we can send you my copy of Sonic Forces to play for as long as you want or not, and then send it back to me. There may be a copy of Untitled Goose Game in there. There's no controlling that. It's an Untitled Goose. You have no say over how that plays out.
Another thing you can do is you can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate it so much to everybody who has left us a review. It really improves our ranking in those like podcast stores, helps people find the show, helps grow the Nintendo Cartridge Society. Thank you to Princess P Pink, who left us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts this past week. I feel like it's an important distinction to make that it is P like the vegetable. Princess P Pink, not any other type of P.
Right, and it's not like the P or the wait, that the I guess it is like the P is pink, right? Like it is like a vegetable that is, instead of being green, it is pink, but instead of being any of those things, it's a princess.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I'm following that. I think I'm following that, and I believe it to be true.
Okay, good. Well, I just want to make sure that we're wrapping our heads around these people's usernames. Thank you so much, Princess P Pink, for leaving us a 5-star review. And thank you to everyone who has left us reviews or ratings anywhere, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you do it. If you are doing it somewhere where we don't normally aren't normally monitoring, just email us or tweet at us. Let us know, and we can give you a shout out on the show. Another thing you can do, look, March is Kirby month. We're getting a brand new Kirby game on the Nintendo Switch, so we're excited, but we also have it's not as bad as Pokemon, but there are parts of the Kirby canon that we are unaware of, and so we are going to spend the month of March playing as many Kirby games as we can, digging in deep to Kirby. So if you have a game that you would like us to play in the Kirby franchise, email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. Or if you have Kirby memories you want to share or anything like that, if you have some perspective on Kirby that you think is important for us to have before we start running our mouths about what Kirby is and is not, you just let us know. Be part of the show. We're giving you some time on this one.
Yeah, we're giving you a little bit of warning because even if we don't have context, that won't stop us from running our mouths about it.
That's right. Think back on Game & Watch month. There was a long time where we didn't know anything what we were talking about there.
I feel I feel as a point of personal pride for us in this show to point out that we were planning Kirby month before Nintendo put Kirby in the Forgotten Land in March. It just so happens that the two coincide.
Right. So it looks like we are geniuses. When it could have gone the other way. It could have been that, it was like a February release. And then we were like, oh, I don't know. We're doing this outdated Kirby month thing. But it doesn't matter. It's going to be a great time. We have already established that we are going to count Kirby Superstar as sort of like table stakes. That's a game that we will both have familiarized ourselves with. Mark, I know, already loves it. I have played a little bit, but I'm going to play more so that we all have sort of the same base level to start from when we are talking about Kirby games. We know the power-ups, we know the gameplay types, and so we'll just sort of move on from there. So I appreciate everyone saying you got to play Kirby Superstar. Don't worry, we will. All right, Mark, are you ready to get into what we've been playing this week?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, that Tetris 99. There was a Tetris Maximus Cup this last weekend for Pokemon Legends Arceus. Mark, how did you find that?
So, my as is well established on this show, Tetris 99 Maximus Cups are something I always enjoy. I like going back into them, but it is usually a long journey for me to get the 100 points in order to be awarded the theme. But this time, I actually made it into the top 10 two separate times,
Mark!
which for myself is essentially a Tetris Maximus.
I'm so proud.
But like wildly inconsistent. Like I would get
Sure.
like a top 9 and then the next time I'd be destroyed and be like 88. I'd be out so quickly.
I have not achieved a Tetris Maximus in this cup yet. I did get the theme because I usually finish somewhere in the top 10. Although I did have one game where I finished like 83 and was like, oh no. But yeah, how do you like the theme itself?
I thought this one was like you mentioned, it's for Pokemon Legends Arceus. It was not what I expected at all. Like the Tetris 99 themes, if you've never like experienced one before, basically they change the background image, like the field that you're playing on. They change what the individual Tetris blocks are composed of. They're still blocks usually, or as far as I can remember, but they have like different images on them that are usually specific to the game. And then there is always a different musical theme. And
three pieces of music. One for like the start of the game, from like 99th place to 50th place, and then from 50 to 10 there's another piece of music, and then from 10 down to 1 there's a final piece of music.
Right. And generally speaking, I only experience 2 of those 3 if I'm lucky. But I thought that the music was not what I expected from a Pokemon game. It's
really pretty.
Very pretty. Reminds me of kind of like the musical stylings of Breath of the Wild a little bit.
Yeah. No, that totally tracks for me, and that it feels like kind of sparse, very open, some like tinkly piano.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was really nice. I always think it's a weird mix when they have these like beautiful orchestral themes with the high kind of like intensity of Tetris 99, but but once you hit 50 and the top 10, it really like kicks in with that high energy. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was fun. I always like these.
Yeah, I always like them too. I found the background image in this one to be just a little too busy, so that like I was having a hard time playing at the bottom of the screen, like at the bottom of the board, because there were like that's where like the character is, like sort of at the bottom of this vista, and there was just a little too much stuff going on down there for me to see what was clearly happening.
I didn't include it on the show notes, but I am still playing Paper Mario on the Nintendo Switch Online, and I'm in the flower fields right now. I think, well, actually, I guess I know that I'm fairly close to the end of the game. I think there are 7 or 8 stars that you have to collect, and this is number 6. But yeah, I am really enjoying Paper Mario. I'm kind of sad when it will come to a close. I do wish that Thousand Year Door was easily accessible, because I'm totally in the mood to just like jump into the next one.
Yeah, you're jonesing for Paper Mario.
Yeah.
I gotta get back to Paper Mario on the Nintendo 64, Nintendo Switch Online. I'm currently playing Banjo-Kazooie on that thing because it that launched on the 20th as just part of the service, which is great, and we knew was coming. And I've also played this game kind of recently, although not for very long, on Xbox because it's available as part of Xbox Game Pass, and it's like the 360 version, I believe. Um, but like that's just not the same. Like I wasn't totally prepared for how I was going to feel playing Banjo-Kazooie again with a Nintendo 64 controller in my hand. Um, I'm really, really loving it. It's totally a nostalgia trip for me, and I know, like, I kind of objectively know it's not a great game, and like the camera is futzy, and like Banjo is kind of slow, but like the music's incredible. The game has this well, I don't always love the aesthetic of the game or like the personality of it. It is like relentless in expressing that personality. Like it is so itself that like I can't help but respect it. And then I'm really just loving the like sort of slowly going around the worlds and like finding all this stuff. Like it's not a it is a platformer, but it's not about the platforming. You know what I mean? Like it's about like poking your head into every little corner of the worlds and just like finding stuff, and I'm really having a great time.
That's awesome. Yeah, there is something so specific about the Nintendo 64 controller that you
Yeah.
just cannot reproduce that experience, that exact experience on any other hardware, on any other controller. I kind of expect that we will eventually get Banjo-Tooie, right?
I mean, probably. I don't know. I mean, I would think so. I wonder if like every rare game they put on the service is like another hurdle for them. Like if it takes some sort of, like political capital with Microsoft or with Rare, or if they can just publish them all, because they published them originally, or like I don't know what the deal is. But I would think that there are other rare games they would prioritize over Banjo Tooie, right? Like um, Donkey Kong 64, I feel like has got to be a game that they put out at some point. I would hope Diddy Kong Racing. Um, but then even like Conquer or Perfect Dark, like any of those, I feel like may take precedence over getting Banjo Tooie out. But I don't know. Tooie is not actually a game that I've played.
Well, same here. That's why I'm kind of I would be interested. Well, of course, a lot of those games that you named I haven't played. Like I never played Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 64. I never played Conquer, and so yeah, it will be interesting to see how many of those rare titles actually end up making it over.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that those with Nintendo characters, Diddy Kong Racing and Donkey Kong 64, would be like a shoe in because like why wouldn't they? Like,
Yeah, Donkey Kong
it's a slam dunk.
Yeah, Donkey Kong 64 feels like a gimme. Like that feels
Yeah.
like it has to be coming at some point.
We didn't see it in the like lineup of although remember there was a couple weeks ago where there was that like a list that was, I guess it was a data mined, that it was like a list with a bunch of blanks in there for what Nintendo 64 games could be part of the service. So like there are so many games in there, and probably there's a slot for Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing. But yeah, it would be cool if they can keep delivering games, like games I'm interested in.
I also it feels like with the Nintendo 64 emulation, they are beginning to run up against some like walls and bugs that didn't really seem to be a problem earlier. And so I do wonder if that will be a factor in what games make it onto Nintendo 64 Switch Online, where it's like, well, we tried with Donkey Kong 64, but for whatever reason, the emulator doesn't play nice with it, so maybe it doesn't come for that
Yeah.
reason.
Well, and it's sort of jumping ahead to some news items that we have coming up later. But Majora's Mask is the next game, and that required the expansion pack in like a physical card that went into your Nintendo 64 to play. So if the emulation is able to do that, presumably it's able to also, because Donkey Kong 64 was another game that required the expansion pack. So we'll see. They are making some improvements to the emulation, and again, we'll get to that in the news portion. So maybe we should just stop talking about Nintendo Switch Online. Although the fact that Banjo-Kazooie came out did make me wonder, like, oh, when are we going to get another batch of Genesis games? Because we got that batch of 5 right around the time of Paper Mario.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right.
That was already a month ago.
Yeah, it seems like they're on a totally different cadence. Honestly, the thing with this is it feels like at any moment we know that there are more Nintendo 64 games coming because Nintendo has said so. But with the Genesis ones, I feel like at any time they could be like, well, that's it. Why are you waiting for more?
Yeah, that was it. That is funny that like at some point we did get confirmation that they were going to continue adding to all of the libraries, and then we got 5 more Genesis games, and I wonder if like that was it. Those 5 more were like the end. There's still so many Sonic the Hedgehog games that aren't on there, like, that seems like it should be sort of just part of it, like an assumed part of it. But then again, I sort of feel like Pilot Wings and Wave Race should have been part of the opening salvo for the Nintendo 64 Online. But
yeah, and neither of those are ones that are in the queue that we know of right now, right?
Not even Wave Race.
I don't think so.
I can't remember. It's been a while since I looked at that list. Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we've been playing this week, and speculation about what we could be playing in weeks to come. But let's get into the new releases and what we might be playing next week.
Today, Tuesday, January 25th, Patrick, you have a game listed on here. The Artful Escape is released on the Switch eShop.
Yeah, it's a cool looking indie game. I don't really know much about it other than it looks cool and has been on other platforms before, and has a good reputation. So that's one that I'm going to be looking into to figure out if I want to spend some time with it.
And then on Thursday, Gunvolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger 9-2, or do you think that's IX2?
I think it's probably IX2. It's a little I and a big X and then the number 2. But we are also about to talk about some Kingdom Hearts games, so like, numbering doesn't mean anything, Mark.
But these are it has been years now at this point since I was paying close attention to Inti Creates like Gunvolt / Mighty Gunvolt series, but I don't know, seeing this on the list made me think back to like 2018 when those collections were releasing on Switch, and you and I were playing quite a bit of those like Inti Create 2D Mega Man-esque type games.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, without the actual like Mega Man IP attached to what Inti Creates is working on, it doesn't have the same sort of stickiness for me. But yeah, it does. Again, this is me talking about a game with absolutely like zero knowledge about what the game is, but like that does sound fun. It sounds interesting. I want to know more.
And then on Friday, Pokemon Legends Arceus is released.
It's exciting. It's interesting. I know nothing, and I would like to know more.
Well, maybe actually, I was going to say maybe on Thursday we'll be able to speak a little more intelligently to it, but I know that that's not true. So
no, like not at all. Like if we have to, Mark, if you right now, gun to your head, someone says, "What's Arceus?" You're dying, right?
I don't know that I can answer. I'd just be like, just pull the trigger. Put us both out of our misery.
Put us both out of my misery. All right, let's close out the new releases. Which brings us to a regular segment on our show. It is time for 433. In 1952, American composer John Cage wrote a piece called 433, wherein a performer or a group of performers didn't play their instruments for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. For the purposes of this show, our instruments are talking about Nintendo. So, for the duration of one performance, 433, Mark and I will talk about something not at all Nintendo related, thus fulfilling the contract of the piece. Mark, today we are posed with a question. The question is, if we were sitcom characters, what would our game be? And so game is in quotes here. You were referring to like the dramatic or comedic premise of the character.
Right. Like in sitcoms, everybody has a role that they play, and every episode they play that role. And, someone's the nerdy one, someone's the jock, someone's the one who breaks things. And so, what would our game be?
Yeah. Well, first, are there like sitcom type like character types that you find yourself like that you like that you're like, I like that kind of character, or like that stick out in your head, whether or not it's you, just one that you respond to?
I struggle to think of any. I mean, I guess that's not true. I was going to say I struggled to think of any like sitcom like tropes or characters that I think are like fun, but that's of course absolutely not true. I think, like well, because okay, when this question came to mind, I was thinking of like those really like hoary like sitcom tropes of the 80s and 90s where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like annoying neighbors, like that kind of stuff. But you think of sitcoms like The Office or sitcoms like Seinfeld, and there are lots of characters who have games that are fun to see repeated over and over.
Yeah. What one of the like character games that sticks out to me like so strongly from my youth is the character of Kimmy Gibbler from Full House. That she's just like the best friend who's like always there, a little annoying, kind of a mooch, makes herself like at home in a way that like isn't normal, but it's also hard to faulter for that because she's a child. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like it's such a specific little like mix of character traits that like when you see it in real life, you'd be like, there's a Kimmy Gibbler thing happening right here, and it could only be described as a Kimmy Gibbler thing.
That is really true. And that brings up like the fact that I feel like there are such almost strict sitcom rules in most sitcoms where it's like you're the put upon spouse. You are, or you're like the spouse who's kind of an idiot, but everybody loves him anyways. You're
Yeah.
the you're the kid who can get away with anything. You are the neighbor who is just generally annoying.
Yeah, well, and there's also this thing I think is maybe more prevalent now, or maybe I'm actually thinking about like 10 years ago, but like idiot with unearned confidence that occasionally the confidence is warranted. Like I'm thinking of like a Dwight Schrute or a Michael Scott, or even like Aziz's character on Parks and Recreation, like these characters, or Chris Pratt's character also on Parks, that like these characters that are like dumb, super confident, and occasionally their confidence like actually gets them the thing they're going for,
Right.
even though they're fools.
So I guess the question then becomes, who are we?
I don't know. You said the nerdy one earlier. I feel like you said.
I know. I hate to say it, but that's probably us.
Yeah. I mean, it probably is us. It's tough because most of these sitcom types are not really like flattering portraits of human beings.
Yeah,
right?
that's very true.
Even someone, just to like go back to The Office, even someone like Jim, like is a smug jerk, and you're like, you're not better than these people. You're part of these people. So yeah,
I
yeah,
think
go ahead.
in a sitcom itself, right? Like let's say we were like in a Home Improvement-esque sitcom. I think
Yeah.
the kind of the characters we would be are like the nerdy characters who are like
Mhm.
neighbors or coworkers of one of the main characters who we just
Sure,
like
yeah.
show up occasionally to talk about.
Offer some advice.
Exactly. We talk about video
Overshare a little
games,
bit.
Star Wars or Marvel. Everybody laughs at how nerdy we are, but we do offer some sage advice, like, well, in Dungeons and Dragons, this and this happens, so maybe you should reconcile with your son.
You're not always gonna roll over an 18. You gotta pour some points into those stats.
And then they'll respond, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but you're right."
Yep. And then when they reiterate it back to their loved ones, they'll mangle it. Oh, all right. Well, I guess we will never know definitively what sitcom archetypes we are. We were accompanied today by pianist Kyle Shaw. All right, Mark, let's get into the news.
Last week, Microsoft announced their intention to acquire Activision Blizzard in a blockbuster deal for $68.7 billion.
Okay, so this is the biggest piece of video game news last week, possibly ever. It is not strictly Nintendo related, but I think we got to touch on it at least a little bit because it's the biggest news and it's huge. It's like real world news. This isn't just video game news. It's like business news. It is global economics news.
Yeah. And I don't know. Obviously, it's going to take years to see how this will play out. And I'm sure there are tons of nuances that we're not going to be able to touch on here. But my personal opinion is that this seems really bad for everybody that isn't Microsoft or isn't like an Activision shareholder. I just think like this amount of consolidation in the industry is long-term bad news.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true here. It was definitely true in Disney purchasing 20th Century Fox a couple years ago for about the same amount of money. It was actually a little more. It was like 70.1 billion. But like I don't know, it is interesting because it's not as though like when we think about I agree with you that like this level of consolidation is bad, but it's not quite monopolistic at this point. Like it's big but small enough that it seems like it probably won't have any sort of like hurdles at the federal level, right? Like it's not going to get busted up, I don't think, because it's not like phone service providers in the 20th century, right, where like they physically need to be broken up because there was only one company. There are still a couple different avenues by which games are distributed, and even though on the hardware side it's really just Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, on the like streaming side there are so many different competitors, and you could argue that that's really where Microsoft is going to start to like make a killing here and like edging out Google, Facebook, and Netflix, and Amazon too. Does Amazon's thing still exist? Like all of these like streaming platforms are also trying to get started, and it seems like Microsoft is just gonna own that space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And you mentioned Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, which is true, but I think Microsoft will probably argue that there's a lot of competition in PC, or at least they're not leading
Sure.
in PC. Steam is, and they will, especially now, be competing in the mobile space where there are a lot of heavy hitters. And so, yeah, I feel like you're right that it is not strictly a monopoly, but it feels very. I think what you were talking about with Disney and Fox feels very instructive to this one, where it does feel very much like a content play. Like
Yeah.
Microsoft, this is a enormous amount of content that will now be easily available to them for Game Pass, which is a huge priority for them. But I think we are now beginning to see the kind of like ramifications of Disney owning Fox, and that is the same sort of thing whenever there's this massive amount of consolidation where it's just like less choice in the marketplace. Like it is
Yeah.
not going to happen that Activision Blizzard will continue to operate as it does, and that they will continue to make the amount of games they do, or the types of games they do, in the same way that they do today.
Which could be argued as a good thing though, right? Because like as far as how Activision Blizzard just like works on a day-to-day basis, they're mired in all sorts of like bullying and sexual harassment claims and unfair work practices and all this kind of stuff that like the house does need to get sorted over at Activision Blizzard. And then if you just look at what their game output is, like Activision as a company is mostly a Call of Duty machine, right? Like they put out the Tony Hawk 1+2 like remake recently, but like other than that, like their portfolio isn't actively as broad as it used to be. And I also feel like Blizzard doesn't really like the Diablo 2 like remake was like the last thing that like they really put out, and it seems like we're behind on like if there was a new World of Warcraft, Starcraft, Overwatch, or Hearthstone, like there are so many of the Activision or the Blizzard series specifically that feel like they could launch a new one tomorrow, and it wouldn't be surprising that there was a new one ready.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
You mean just because it's been so long since
Yeah.
there? Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's no secret in the past few years, that Blizzard is operationally a mess, and that's not even counting all of the like
Right.
sexual, like all the sexual harassment and all that kind of stuff that has come to light in the past year or so. And so yeah, in that way, great. What absolutely, there's a lot of room for improvement there. So yeah, I think the Microsoft this deal is really complicated, as I'm sure all of these deals that are so large are going to be, and it's
Right.
going to take a very long time for us to fully understand the ramifications. But I also just feel like this this amount of consolidation in the game industry is not good news, because in order for other companies to compete, we're basically, I am curious to see if this is going to cause the same sort of ripple effect that we have seen in the entertainment industry, where when a behemoth of this size gets created, other companies start agitating, or like, well, in order for us to compete with Microsoft games now, we're going to who do we have to acquire to be that big? And it just sets off this domino effect of companies consolidating.
Yeah, well, and like that is an interesting question too, though, because it's not like the other gaming companies in terms of Sony PlayStation and uh, you know like Netflix and Amazon, like and Google, like all those places are gathering up resources, right? And like purchasing studios. Like Sony kind of like quietly is purchasing studios all the time. Which is nothing. Very few purchases of the of the last several years even come close to this amount of money, or this like huge cache of IP and just games. But it seems like something that is happening other places in the industry, just not on this scale. So yeah, I mean, totally. Are there other game companies that are up for grabs like this? Like, and how scary is it to think of someone buying like Square Enix or something, and like how does that change what weird what weird stuff that company puts out and where they put it out. And it also like all these all three of the like hardware manufacturers that we were talking about are big companies, but like Nintendo can't buy a Square Enix, right? Nintendo can't buy Take-Two, like whereas Sony or Microsoft, either one probably could.
Right.
Like I don't know how Nintendo could compete on that level, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, or that they would really be like, Nintendo doesn't strike me as a company that is interested in
Right.
becoming like a behemoth like that. So yeah, one other thing that I thought was interesting about this is that later in the week, Microsoft released a statement, maybe in response to something that Sony said, but basically saying that we're looking forward to Call of Duty being on PlayStation in the years ahead. So at least the way they're talking now, that it is not necessarily going to mean that all of these Activision Blizzard King franchises are going to be Microsoft exclusive. So,
but they could be, and like how they're available on those platforms is also still up for debate. Like they say that it's their intention to honor existing contracts, and that they're not going to take something like Call of Duty away from the communities that are currently playing them, which I mean, honestly, doesn't read to me like we're going to put all Call of Duty games on other platforms in the future. It means the Call of Duty that you're currently playing, we're not going to take away from you. Yeah, go ahead.
It also kind of reminds me of all the language we always see when these huge acquisitions are made. Same thing happened with like T-Mobile and Sprint when they were going to merge, where it's like, no, this is going to generate more jobs. This is going to be great for competition. Always, without fail, turns out to not be true. Thousands of people lose their jobs.
Yeah,
It's just more consolidation. Also, it's remarkable to me how quickly this deal seemingly came together for like a
no
merger
kidding.
of this size. It
Yeah.
really does seem like the past, few months when Activision was getting rightfully all of that negative press uh, for the way that the company is run, that kind of looks like Activision was looking for an escape hatch and Microsoft came calling.
Yeah, I mean it is funny to like look back just a couple weeks ago and seeing Phil Spencer of Xbox like issuing a statement being like, we are reevaluating our relationship or how we do business with Activision Blizzard, and it's like oh, I mean that is quite the revision to your relationship. Now you own them.
Also interesting that you know then Microsoft is acquiring a company with such a toxic
Yeah.
like internal workings and reputation, because that's a culture is a difficult thing to change in a company, and it will be very interesting to see how they go about doing that.
Yeah, I mean you would think that they would have to just like clean house, right? But then it's almost like, what did you buy?
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. So
Yeah, and the deal itself isn't even going to be finalized until like like June or July 2023 anyway. So not only are we going to not see the ramifications of this for a couple years, we're not even going to see it technically happen for another year and a half anyway. So
yeah. And
we'll yeah.
and like you said, it'll be, I agree with you that that probably, the government isn't going to step in and trying to stop the deal, but it will be interesting to see if there are concessions they have to make if like Microsoft has or Activision have to make in order to close the deal, like if there are studios they have to sell off or other, agreements they have to make in order to do that.
Yeah.
Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga has a release date again.
Woo!
And a blowout gameplay trailer was released after being delayed out of 2020 and then again out of 2021. The release date is now set for April 5th, which is just a few months away. But Patrick,
April the 5th be with you, Mark.
how do you believe this? Do you believe this to be true?
Know. I don't know. I mean, why should we believe it?
Yeah, exactly. Are we ready to open our hearts to hurt once again?
Here's the thing. This is, I believe, the like shortest time between the like announcement of the date and like the actual release date, and also it is a firm release date of April 5th. I think they're probably ready to hit it. Like if I was a betting man, I would say this is the one they actually keep. But man, it's absolutely wild to think that this game will really come out.
Yeah, it's been a long time. The trailer showed off a new focus on combat, including combo systems that seems kind of more akin to the Arkham games or other character action games like that.
Yeah, I'm very excited because the Lego games in the past obviously are, like combat heavy, but it's not as though the combat is involved in any way, right? It's all just sort of like a soft hack and slash, and then with like some light puzzle elements. But this really seemed to focus on like how the combat was meaningful and dynamic and looked cool, and I can't wait to swing a lightsaber in this thing.
It also doesn't look like the game works exactly like we thought it did as far as the openness and ability to jump from film to film. It looks like you can like tackle the game beginning whatever trilogy you want to tackle. So the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, or the prequel trilogy, but that you aren't going to be able to say, I want to play through Last Jedi, and then I'm going to jump to Attack of the Clones, and I'm going to jump to A New Hope. Seems like it'll be like you could start with any trilogy, but within that trilogy, you play through the 3 movies.
Yeah, which I guess is it's a little disappointing in that it's not what we thought, but maybe the trailer is doing a bad job of like presenting it, and you actually could start with Return of the Jedi if you wanted to. Um, Unclear at the moment, but I just remember that being one of the sort of selling points early on. That it was like, oh yeah, if you just want to hop into Revenge of the Sith, you can do it. But maybe that's not strictly the case.
Revenge of the Sith, it just made me think like I've never experienced the moment when Anakin gets burned to a crisp in
In Lego.
lava in Lego
Yeah.
before. So that will be a new experience for me personally.
Yeah, Lego Mustafar. I don't want to play through 2.5 other movies before I can get there. Like, it's I don't know. I'm very excited about this game, so I actually do want to play through the 2 other movies before I get there. But yeah, it's just the openness that being sort of like tamped down a little bit makes me just wonder about the other openness that may have been tamped down. And we'll get a little bit later on to some notes about crunch involved in the creation of this game. So it's possible that like where it was originally spec'd and what it looked like when we saw it at E3 in 2019 is they had to like strip it back down to nuts and bolts to like figure out how to actually make it work the way that they were promising, and then realize that they couldn't deliver on everything they were promising.
Also, they revealed a new feature called Mumble Mode.
Mumble mode. I'm very into mumble mode. Mark, are you tuned into the whole mumble mode thing? Or
I
should
had
walk you
to I
through
had
it?
to look it up to know
Okay.
what exactly it is, but do you want to explain it?
Sure. So there is sort of a divide in the TT games, Lego games, where there was a while where they were recreating scenes from movies and like entire plots from movies without having any dialogue. That the characters would just sort of like blah 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 blah, and just getting it across through the sort of visual storytelling, and it would be jokey and fun that way. But in the last, I don't know, probably like 7 or 8 years, the games have been fully voice acted, and that is good, but it also like kind of changes the experience from a like pantomime funny thing to a funny thing with words. And so in this game, which is fully voice acted and everything, you can turn on a mumble mode where they're now no longer saying the actual words that they're saying. It's just sort of blah 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 blah, and you'll just have to infer the story from the visual storytelling. I think it's a cool thing to include it. It makes me wonder if it's like the exact same cutscene, but with the dialogue changed to not dialogue, which seems like it's not fulfilling the same kind of like you have to approach that from that's like a first decision, right? And then like you write the scene based on the fact that your characters are mumbling, but it's still cool.
Yeah, TT Games bringing peace to families before brothers, sisters warring against each other
That's right.
uh, over whether Lego games should have voice acting or not. No longer with Mumble Mode. But yeah, I do think we need to talk about like coincidentally or probably intentionally, the announcement of the release date was timed to a Polygon story about crunch that went into uh, the creation of Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga at TT Games, but also the long history of the work environment at TT Games. And it really was, like, at least for me, a little bit of a rude awakening in just how pervasive toxic work environments seem to be in games. And then it
Yeah.
also makes me feel like that is probably just true everywhere.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of places just probably have toxic work environments.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of inertia at bigger businesses, right? And the fact that video games require so much effort from so many people that like to change one thing or to modernize one thing means having to change 100 job descriptions. Like the inertia sort of makes sense, but it necessarily leads to like bad work environments.
Right. So, over 30 workers spoke to Polygon. Principal complaints included overtight development schedules, the company's crunch culture and outdated development tools.
Yeah, the outdated development tools in particular. Check out this Polygon feature, by the way, if you haven't seen it. That's to the listeners, not to you, Mark. I know you have. um, but the talking about the outdated development tools, like they wanted to move to Unreal Engine, or at least like some of the developers, a lot of the people that talk to Polygon wanted to move to Unreal Engine, but they were stuck using an older engine that was not able to achieve the things that they wanted to, and it made recruiting harder. It made everything more difficult because people know how to use Unreal, but they don't know how to use this proprietary thing they were working with. And maybe it wasn't proprietary. I might be speaking out of turn there.
Well, I think I don't know. It just, what I thought was so interesting is, they talk about, I think there were 3 different, leaders of TT Games over the time period that the article covers. And while like some improvements have been made, or, are at least trying to be made, for the most part, it seems like each opportunity for a fresh reset was not taken, and those problems were so pervasive. And it again made me just think of what we were talking about with Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. And it's like making changes is so complicated without almost like a clean sweep of cleaning house and starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, and it's this is also a good like where we can like put a pin in the corkboard here, and we can trace it back to TT Games is under the umbrella of Warner Brothers Games, WB Games, which had its own like bit of turbulence a couple years ago when Warner Brothers was gonna, or Time Warner was gonna sell them off, and even before that, like this game was in development right before they were even owned by WB Games. Is that right, or am I wrong in that? Maybe I'm wrong in that.
I think that TT Games has been owned by Warner Brothers for a very long time. I guess I don't know when. I'm not sure. Is the answer.
Yeah. But regardless, it means that those like changes in leadership, like Mark was saying, that there is something going on like in the overall WB Games umbrella. There are a bunch of studios there, like high profile ones that we haven't seen games from in a long time. The forthcoming Arkham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League are from Warner Brother or WB Studios, and it's just like, I don't know, it seems like all the studios are slow to drop a new game, and that's, I mean, seemingly at this point got to just be from mismanagement, right?
I wonder if I just need to like internally just assume that every video game company has terrible culture unless proven otherwise.
It's
Do you know what I
possible,
mean?
yeah.
Because like I had never really considered that the TT Games might be bad to work for, which is silly on my part, because it's like, well, I mean, odds are probably better that a company is bad to work for than a company is good to work for. So yeah,
Yep.
It was just a little bit of like a wake up call for myself to read that article. The Kingdom Hearts games are coming to Switch as cloud versions later this year, and now we have a specific release date on February 10th. You will be able to play these games as cloud versions, and the pricing is a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, it's wild.
So Kingdom Hearts 1.5 and 2.5 Remix, which is a single package, is $40. Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue is $50. Kingdom Hearts 3 with the Remind DLC is $50, and you can bundle of all 3 for $90. Or right now you can pre-order that bundle, and it's marked down to $72. But that feels like a lot for cloud versions of these games.
Well, it feels a lot like for the games themselves. You can get Kingdom Hearts the complete package for other platforms, for Xbox and PlayStation, for like $20, $25. Like they are routinely on sale below that. So like this is to me this is just a bad deal. And then the fact that it's cloud versions, it makes it an even worse deal, because you don't like. You own access to it, but I guess only for as long as. What happens when we're not playing Nintendo Switch anymore? Like, do you still have access to these games? Probably not.
Right, and at some point the servers are going to shut down.
Yeah.
But Patrick, you checked out the demo for this. What was your experience like?
Yeah, so there are demos available for all three of these games on the Switch eShop at the moment. So if you are interested in playing any of these games in the cloud version, please play the demo first. My experience playing the demo for the first one was not good, a lot of lag, and the actual quality of the game notwithstanding, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that I would put up with if I wanted to actually play it. If I wanted to really play these games, I would play them on PlayStation.
Banjo-Kazooie on Nintendo Switch Online was just released last week, but we already have an announcement for the next game to hit the Nintendo 64 service, and that is Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, heading sometime in February. No specific date yet, but sometime in February.
Yeah, and if history is any indication, it'll be like the last week-ish. It'll be like 2/3 of the we had it on the 20th for Banjo-Kazooie, and you have to assume that like about then is when we'll see the Majora's Mask.
Interesting. Also, in addition to Banjo-Kazooie last week, it looks like Nintendo is tweaking the Nintendo 64 emulator with these releases as well.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if we talked about it on the show, but when the Nintendo Switch Online Nintendo 64 was released, people noticed that some of the emulation was imperfect, like in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, in the Shadow Link room, in the water temple. Some of the visual elements were missing, like the fog in the room was gone. There was no reflection in the water of like the tree or the like cabin or house or whatever that is in there.
Yeah, and there's some like transparency about the water that's not quite right.
So the fog is still missing, but with the update that was released with Banjo-Kazooie last week, that transparency and the reflection seem to have been improved and brought back. So they are making changes and adjustments to the emulator as they go along.
Yeah, well, so this is my question though. What does this mean? Did they just change the emulator for are these changes to the overall emulator? Are these changes to just the way the thing emulates Ocarina of Time, or are they somehow like hot fixing Ocarina of Time? I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the last, because like if they're emulating, why would they go in and like mess with the source code there? But like I don't know. It all feels very. It all feels very straight. I just have all kinds of questions.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, and like we were talking about earlier, are they making these? I'm guessing they're continuing to look at the library and see which games they can emulate for the service later on. And so maybe in addition to the bug fixes for the games that are released, they're also looking at what they're running up against for games that have not been released yet. And
Yeah,
it's
no,
just kind
that's
of like
actually
a cascading effect.
that's a great point, because like the fog effects, and the fog that's not visible or that's not present in Ocarina of Time is also the same fog that's not present in like Mario Kart, like when you're in that Choco Mountain level. There used to be a layer of fog there. If you're playing it on the Nintendo 64 Switch Online, it's not there, and you can just like see the draw distances are better on the emulated game than it was on the original hardware, so they don't need the fog. But the fog was like something that they built in as like an aesthetic element. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe that is the reason we haven't seen Pilot Wings or Wave Race 64, because those, especially Wave Race, really relied on fog to obscure like the outer edges of the tracks and stuff like that. So, yeah, but it's weird to think that they're like in a world where they're like, well, someday we'll be able to make the fog work on this thing.
Well, and maybe they won't. Maybe they won't.
Maybe they won't.
And that's why we'll never get Turok.
Yeah, but that's a blessing though.
NPD released their best-selling list of games and hardware for 2021, and the Nintendo Switch was the best-selling console of the year. Though everything was basically selling out, so PlayStation and Xbox numbers are likely supply constrained. Still impressive though.
Go Nintendo Switch.
The top 20 games of 2021, and remember, Nintendo's digital sales numbers aren't included in this. No surprise, Call of Duty Vanguard from Activision Blizzard and Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, the top 2 best-selling games, followed by Madden, NFL 22. But Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are the number 4 best-selling games of 2021. Again, by like physical dollar sales. But an interesting note is that this is Pokemon's best year of physical software sales since the year 2000.
Which, okay, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, obviously, driving a lot of that. New Pokemon Snap, driving that as well. And also, like, continued sales of Sword and Shield, right? So there are a couple Pokemon games that are actually, like, driving that. But it's still most successful physical software sales means not even counting the digital sales, right? Like, and I don't know. I feel like people got to be buying these games digitally, right? Like, it seems like the Pokemon is probably in even more impressive place than we think it is.
Yeah,
from these numbers.
I think you're right. Also in the top 10 from Nintendo, Mario Kart 8 is number 7, beating out Resident Evil Village. I don't know, Mario just continuing to prove how crazy successful Mario Kart 8 Deluxe continues to be.
Yeah.
And then number 10 is Super Mario 3D World, which I'm assuming this is the Bowser's Fury version on Switch, but I think like Mario Kart 8, technically they're counting it as like one title.
Okay, so if anyone bought Super Mario 3D World for the Wii U last year, it also got added to this total.
That's what it seems like to me, yeah.
All right, well, it's possible. And then also in the top 20, Animal Crossing New Horizons is at number 14, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is at 17, bearing in mind, of course, that that's only for physical stuff, right? So any of the, if any Happy Home Paradise that was sold for Animal Crossing New Horizons wouldn't have been counted in this list, and neither would the 2 character packs for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So both of those games, in addition to just being their digital sales numbers not being included on there, are making more money than it would appear they are from this list.
Also, the top 20 Switch games, 2 things I wanted to call out that I thought were interesting here. One, Metroid Dread makes it in at number 11. So,
ooh, just out of the top 10.
Just out of the top 10, but very happy to see Metroid Dread on this list. The second one is that Super Mario 3D All-Stars makes the list, a game that I guess was delisted in March, but has continued, I think is continually available through Amazon or copy still on the shelves.
Yeah, well, and the fact that it was delisted on the Nintendo eShop would be immaterial to this list because they do not count digital sales.
That's right. That's right. Great point. And finally, Mario Kart Tour, the mobile Mario Kart game, is hosting a Wario versus Waluigi tour.
Honestly, Mark, how dare they make us choose between Wario and Waluigi?
It seems unfair.
It seems not just unfair, but like morally wrong. Like, just let us have both. These are not characters we should be pitting against each other.
Well, I think luckily, Patrick, they don't kill whatever character doesn't win.
All right, Mark, let's get out of the news. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and follow us on Apple Podcasts. Give us a rating on Spotify. And if you like the episode, please share it on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you share stuff. It helps us out tremendously when you do that, and we like to see it. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell, and the show is at Nincart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying thank you for listening.
I'm Brian Husky. I'm bald.
And I'm Charlie Sanders, and I'm also bald. And we host Bald Talk on the Campfire Media Network.
Bald Talk is the podcast where two bald comedians talk to anyone bald about being bald.
But this show isn't just for baldies, Brian. Harrows will love it too.
Bald Talk gets into vulnerability, vanity, insecurity, and self-acceptance, reminding us that we all have our respective bald spots. Not that bald spots are a bad thing.
No way. I mean, my entire head is one big bald spot.
It is one huge, beautiful bald spot, Charlie.
Get Bald Talk on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, I have like a little bit of hair, but not like you. Like, you're really bald.
I'm truly bald.
Great. I mean, it's
I'm
great.
balder than you.
You are balder than me.
Only on Bald Talk. Campfire.